In today's episode, we are joined by Spencer Tuttle, the CRO at Redis. Spencer takes us on an incredible journey through his career, highlighting his rapid ascent from an individual contributor to a CRO in just 8 years. He also delves into his experience as a first-line leader, emphasizing the pivotal role of transparency, team building, and fostering a growth-orientated culture. This is his playbook.
Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns. I'm Simon Kutis, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ollie Kune.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And it's an absolute pleasure to be joined by Spencer Tuttle. Spencer, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, Spencer.
By way of an introduction, Spencer, you are currently the CRO of Redis, an amazing project that we're really looking forward to hearing a lot more about. But actually, as part of this recording today, one of the things that we really want to focus on is you've had such a sharp trajectory in terms of your career and how you've been able to transition from individual contributor all the way to kind of CRO in such a fast way. Really want to understand how that happens and some of the fundamentals, and we'll go through the journey from the start and kind of come back right round to the present day. But in a very broad way, Spencer, where does it all start? You know, what are the fundamentals that you think have given you the foundations to have such a trajectory?
That is an open-ended question.
It is, I did say.
Look, I think it's, we were talking about this before the show. I mean, you got to take one step at a time. I mean, you say it's obviously been a real quick journey. It hasn't felt like a quick journey throughout that journey. It's been a lot of different roles and a lot of different successes and kind of trials and tribulations at the end of the day. But we were talking about it. You know, you can't be a great sales rep unless you're a great SDR, and you can't go be a great frontline leader unless you're, you know, a great AE at the end of the day. And the beauty about the career path is just trying to, you know, master that position that you're in at that moment in time so that you can open yourself up for the next one.
So obviously, you kind of mentioned there that you have to be a great SDR to be a great, you know, rep. Has your focus always been mastery, or has it been just being accountable? Just kind of in a much more general. What's your focus? What's your mindset been at each gate of that journey?
I think it's a couple things. That's a good question. I mean, first and foremost, it's learning from as many people around you as humanly possible, right? I mean, you can look at the journey. I've been lucky enough to work for some incredible people and work alongside some incredible people, peers and leaders at the end of the day. And I think it's trying to get as many nuggets from each one of those individuals when you're in that moment in that journey. And then, you know, I think the secret sauce is trying to combine all those little nuggets together and make it your own, so that you're credible at the end of the day. You know, you're real, you're transparent, and you can bring that to your team, your organization at that moment in time.
Did you go in there? I think it's 6 years you finished an IC to then get to your first CRO gig. Did you go in there with the mindset, I want to become a CRO, or did it naturally happen?
I definitely did not go in with the mindset of wanting to be a CRO. Right. I wake up some mornings and still question if I want to be a CRO. No, not at all. I mean, like if you go back and look at the journey, I think I jumped into opportunities because they sounded exciting at the time. You know, I mean, I left BMC and joined AppDynamics because there was an incredible number of people joining at AppDynamics that moment in time that I knew were great, and I wanted to be part of that. I didn't quite know what that even meant. You know, I knew that I had to go execute on my job at that moment in time, which was an IC, but I wasn't going into AppDynamics saying I want to go become a leader, second, third line leader. I was just thinking about that moment and the opportunity and the people that were kind of around me or, you know, on that journey with me.
Yeah. I suppose then the question is, did you know you were ready for each of those next development areas?
No. Still. Yeah. Right. No, I think you get forced into or thrust into opportunities probably a little before you're ready.
Right.
And, you know, obviously I know you got a lot of different kind of subset of listeners. I would just urge people to take advantage of that, right? If you got great leadership around you and above you, you can hop into opportunities probably a little bit before you're ready for them. And I think that's been my journey if you look at it.
You talk about the fact that you were kind of unconsciously competent before you became consciously competent. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So obviously I started at a company called Coradian. I mean, you guys can check the years as you're taking,
That's what I'm doing
as
now.
you're looking at your notes. And it was a bootstrapped, startup technology company. Probably before that was really all the rage. Obviously there's hundreds of those now. This was back in, I think, 2005, 2006. And I was on that journey for 4 or 5 years, starting as an SDR, got out into the field, ended up moving down to New York to open up an office in New York, and really just tried to figure out how to sell by hitting my number, staying active and creating as much pipeline and opportunity as possible. I don't think it was really until, BMC acquired Coradian, and I didn't know what Medic was. I knew what they were in theory, but I didn't have this playbook or this, treasure map, so to speak, on how to go through an opportunity. And that really kind of started that change to becoming a lot more competent, I would say.
Absolutely, because I think, just to verify those times, obviously joined as an SDR in 2006, did that for a year, then moved into channel sales manager 2007, 2008, then out into the fields in a senior account AE role, 2007 to 2011. So a good 5 years of, that I suppose, entry into software sales, then thrown into the fire 2011 at BMC.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that journey and talk to us about, that exposure to, the playbook as we know it.
Yeah. I was definitely thrown into the fire, I'll tell you. Like, there was only, as I said, it was a Boston-based company, and I think there was 3 of us in New York. There was one other salesperson and an SE. That was the size of the New York team. We got acquired by BMC, and they brought us into one of those Monday kind of huddle PG days, because the second, they had a new tool in their tool belt, they wanted to start generating pipeline, and they just threw me in the middle of this lion's den, and I had no idea what I was walking into. And, started to introduce them to Coradian and what we did, and all of a sudden it just became a drill down on my forecast. I was having people, ask me questions about my forecast, my pipeline. I was like, what the hell am I walking into right now? And it's a pretty funny story, actually. There's a guy that you've had on your show, Dave Boyle, and Dave's a legend in his own right. And he learned that it kind of in this first session, I don't even know if the acquisition had closed yet, I had a mature opportunity with Estee Lauder, like deep in the pipeline. And we had a meeting later that week, and he's like, I'm coming with you. And I was like, all right, this guy is energetic, to say the least. You know what I mean? And, starts asking me all these questions. Is the economic buyer in there? Is this a midpoint review? Have we done a POV scoping? Have we done a business value assessment? And I really didn't know any of these acronyms. I knew how to define and defend the value of Coradian. I knew how to, go find budget holders and go build champions, but I didn't really know, like, the lingo of all that. And, Dave joins me for a POC playback meeting at the end of the day, and we did have the economic buyer in the room. We go and do, a POC playback, and we ended up getting the deal. And, Dave and I walk out, and he's like, you got to join BMC as a rep. You can't be an overlay anymore. And it was great, it really changed my journey, because, 2 days later, I was sitting with Dan Fougere and Michael Lendener doing a sales challenge, which I didn't even know existed back then, and, joined BMC to be an enterprise account executive for the next 3 years.
What was your reaction to that? That, taking yourself back to that moment of realization. Take us back to how you felt, what you were thinking, how did it adjust your motivation or your thoughts or your priorities? Help us understand that a bit more.
I think I realized that this is a true profession, and the best in the business here treat this like that. And up to that moment in time, I understood and got to witness a lot of sales professionals, but I think then I got to see a network that truly treated this as a science and an art, and were trying to better themselves every day in terms of being more predictable and driving, more success for themselves and their organizations and their customers, and that was addicting. I think that's what I fell in love with.
Yeah. And what steps did you take to develop, right? You've obviously got some real good support mechanisms around you, but as we know, it isn't just about, finding yourself a coach and, working with that coach. It takes a lot more than that. At that stage, How did your mindset change, and what were you doing additional to not necessarily keep up, but to continue learning?
I think it's self-reflection. I mean, it's witnessing and watching how other people execute on what you guys have called the playbook and what everyone calls the playbook right now, and it's understanding where your gaps are in there and what you can learn from these folks to go make your own and bring that into your business, whether it be early in the pipeline from a PG perspective, or champion building, or going and running an incredible POV or POC. It's witnessing others and then going and just trying and testing that yourself. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it's the bias for action, though. You can listen to these podcasts all day. You can read every book, on the shelf. But if you're not taking what you've learned and then going and trying to implement it really, really quickly and learning from it, I don't think you're ever going to get better.
Did you always make your number?
I think for the most part, I did make my number. Yeah.
And when you were at BMC, obviously, it's a different type of organisation. There's obviously a lot of pressure. Did you kind of find that was in your comfort zone, or did you have to get yourself uncomfortable and kind of change your behaviours, or was it just a natural fit for you?
I think you either loved that environment or you hated it, if you want me to be honest. And I loved it, like from day one. I thought I saw myself just around people that really, like we just talked about, took this profession seriously and wanted to better themselves. And I decided, if this is what I want to do for my career, these are the type of people I want to surround myself by. So I was addicted to it like the first weekend. I think others could have veered away from it. There was an intensity, there was a pressure, there was a pace that some might not have appreciated, but I thought it was fantastic.
If you were to talk to your reps that are kind of early in their career, people joining your business, or lots of our listeners are at different stages of their career, what would you take from that moment in time? Because obviously the vast majority of reps are going to be there right now. So what advice would you be giving them in terms of what they should be focusing at that stage when you were reflecting on where you were on your journey?
Put some pressure on yourself, right? Like, don't be afraid to put that pressure on yourself. I think it was a pressure-packed culture and industry at that moment in time. If you weren't generating pipeline, you were probably out. If you weren't hitting your number on a regular basis, you were probably out. And I think that's not a bad thing to be a part of. So I would say veer into the pressure. As they say, pressure is a privilege. And
so is that being more ambitious? Is that being more generate? What does actually put pressure on yourself mean?
Don't make excuses. Hold yourself accountable on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a quarterly basis with your leadership, with yourself. It's a two-way street, but at the end of the day, find a way to find a way. And I think that's what I mean by putting some pressure on yourself. Take the excuses out of the business and find a way to find a way. And I think that was definitely built into that BMC culture for those years.
Sure.
So obviously 2 very successful years at BMC, and then 2013 joined the very prestige sales organization AppDynamics 2013. Can you tell us about that transition and how that came about?
Yeah, as we were talking offline, I think you knew there was a talented bunch of people at BMC for those few years that I was there, and I started to see folks kind of go on different journeys. This is where people really started to go to those kind of pre-IPO, pre-unicorn. This was before unicorns existed. So truthfully, I was just following talent. I saw people like Paul Kapp and Jesse Green and Dolly Ryack and others go to AppDynamics, and I said, this is a place that I want to be, and joined there, I think, in 2013, and it was just a wild pace, throughout the next 7 years there of obviously, growing massively year over year and giving all of ourselves, multiple opportunities to grow in our career.
You would have had lots of options at that moment, I imagine, because you had, the perfectos, you had the, you've got, different there was lots of different directions you could have gone. What was it? Why did you choose AppD?
It's a great question.
It is a good question. So first and foremost, I was in the space. Before BMC being a co-Radiant, we were a front-end application performance monitoring solution. From a technical perspective, I knew that if you could go figure out the back end, if you could go figure out distributed transactions and where the code was having performance issues, that was the secret sauce. AppDynamics got up and running very, very quickly. Like the total cost of ownership and the time to value was incredible. And as a salesperson, you got to see it with your customers and your prospects. And you understood this before joining AppDynamics. And then a lot of what we talked about, I mean, people. I think you got to go trust leadership and where great people are going. And if I learned anything from AppDynamics, technology matters, timing matters, market matters, but the most important thing is being part of a great team. And I thought that just presented itself in spades at AppDynamics.
In our first series, obviously, we spoke a lot about the importance of blade logic, laying the foundations of the playbook.
Yeah.
But many will argue AppDynamics is where it was there was the further iterations just took it to another level. What were you experiencing in that time at AppD, and how the playbook started to evolve, and tell us about your momentum as part of that process as well.
Yeah, I think obviously if you look at pre-AppDynamics, the playbook was, especially if you go to post-PG into the proof of concept, the proof of value stage, the getting to the economic buyer, it was much more set in stages, because you weren't really going to deploy software in a POC until you got to the economic buyer, you got full scoping. AppDynamics was the first time where you could start to do a free trial. Software was much easier to use. It was much quicker. It was much more fluid. So we had to start to pivot the playbook into that new pace at the end of the day. You had to figure out how to build champions. You had to figure out how to qualify POCs and get it into a process when folks could really quickly take you out of that process. When it was really hard to take folks out of the process pre that at BMC, you either engaged in the process or you didn't, and you wouldn't go evaluate the software. I think AppDynamics changed that, and what that leadership team did, what everyone did there, was continuously try to reinvent ourselves to map to that pace. I think secondly on that is, it really became the transition for me, and I think a lot of us, from perpetual software to subscription software. And the difference was, not to sound like a horrible salesperson, is perpetual software, you could sell it and kind of go, you kind of left and went and kept hunting for your next customer, because the 20% maintenance was due on top of that. Subscription software, I mean, it's only worthwhile to your company if you go renew that customer, delight that customer, expand and renew that customer. So I think that's when we really started to bring in a lot of the value, kind of as we were deploying software throughout the life cycle of the software up to the renewal and expansion.
At what point of your journey in your career would you say it was at BMC, or do you think it was at AppDynamics, did you have the aha moment that you really got this? The formula worked and you just got it?
Look, I think you're always tweaking it, if
Right.
you want me to be really honest. I think once you think you've got it, you're probably in a lot of trouble.
Okay.
But I think there were a couple years there at AppDynamics where I was lucky enough to be running the Northeast and then the East, and we were just cranking. And that was incredible. And the whole company was, though. So you definitely knew you were a part of something special there, and it wasn't just the technology, it was the whole go-to-market team engaging kind of cohesively.
Yeah, because you did that role at AppDynamics for 2 years. In 2015, stepped up to do your first-line leadership position as an area director, as you just mentioned, of the Northeast. Tell us about that. You've now taken, how did you know you were ready, and what was it about taking on a first-line leadership?
Again, like we talked about, I don't know if I knew I was ready. But it's kind of funny because, like, you look at software companies now, and if I look at any of my team, I think they try to get to leadership really, really quickly. I do think at that moment in time, and maybe I'm just kind of playing it back in my head, I wasn't in a rush to get to leadership. There was a belief back then that, the highest performing ICs were the highest paid people in the company. And I just came off of, I think it was actually only 18 months where did very well for myself, had 2 young kids, and was saying, wait, do I want to leave this for, a lot less upside at the end of the day and probably a lot more work? So it took me, a talking to from Dolly, which wasn't probably the first or last time that I got one. And then I jumped into that role, and obviously really glad that I did. It changed my career and just changed the way I look at this whole journey and kind of what I enjoy out of the role now, which is, obviously trying to put people in the position to succeed and help them succeed.
Yeah, we had Brian Souza on the show recently, and obviously he's created a training program, and he identified 4 particular traits when you step into a first line, when it's into your first line or first management role. Yeah. So you've got the super rep who's going to go out there and do everything. Yeah. You've got the micromanager. You've got, what were the other two?
The nice guy.
Or the nice guy.
Yeah.
When you first took on that leadership role, did you fall into any like those types of camps, or did you just?
I think it's probably easiest to go into the super rep, especially I was a rep at AppDynamics, so it's a lot easier to go into the super rep mode there. I think if you're coming in from the outside, you probably pick one of the other routes, which I don't disagree with, right? The super nice guy or the micromanager. I was pretty lucky I think it was the first aha moment for me on how important that first R is, right? I was told to go recruit a team, and I was basically a team of 1 or 2 people at the time. And I was lucky enough to go recruit a pretty great team pretty quickly. I went out and hired Josh Boland and Mike Vicini and John Kim in the matter of 5 or 6 days, essentially like that. And I think we did the math 6 or 7 years later, and those 3 combined for like $175 million in total contract value software. So it's pretty easy to not be a super rep or not micromanage when you got a team like that.
But you say that, but people obviously follow you, right? And if you're going to have people like that who are going to choose you as a manager over a different manager or a different company, a different opportunity, you have to be able to provide them with something to say, I'm coming with Spencer on this journey. Tell us, why do you think they joined you on that journey, and why did they believe in you that you were going to help them get to where they needed to get to?
Back then, I probably don't know, but now, now the answer is, look, it's got to be a two-way street. Obviously, what do we ask for of an individual contributor? We ask for someone to come in and generate pipeline. We have someone to come in and manage their opportunities along, everything that you folks have talked about in the playbook, and do it with professionalism, do it with high character, right? Be curious with your customers. And what do we have to return? We have to return a culture of enablement and a culture where folks can learn and earn and grow their career massively. So if you're not providing that back as a leader, I think you're going to fail pretty quickly.
How important do you think it has been for your trajectory, the fact you've always been able to hire really well?
Like I said, the first R is pretty critical. I think once you figure that out as a leader, you can get around some probably mistakes if you have a great team. And like I said, I think I learned that in those BMC days, being around what I thought was a pretty special team that I was lucky to kind of move into after that acquisition, and I definitely saw it at AppDynamics. So when you see it and you've seen the movie play out before, you know how important it is.
But there's one thing wanting it, it's another thing doing it. How were you able to recruit well? Or what did you do differently, do you think, perhaps to maybe some others? Or what things have served you well in being able to recruit good teams?
Look, you've got to pick a great company so that you can offer what we just talked about, like the organizational opportunity and the culture for folks to advance their career, for folks to learn, for folks to obviously earn kind of life-changing money. And then you've got to be able to be transparent, I think. I think one of the things that has helped me get to where I am and really work with the team is I'm open and honest on what I expect and want from them, and I'm open and honest in terms of what I'm working on personally and professionally, and where our gaps may be in an organization and what we're working on. The last thing that I want is someone to walk into Redis tomorrow and not understand what they're walking into. Like, that is a quick way to ruin all credibility, and frankly to have a turnover rate or an attrition rate that's too high. So I think it's obviously offering the organizational and culture aspects that we talked about, but a lot of it's transparency. knowing what you're walking into and knowing where we want to go and painting that story for folks and asking them to be part of it. Like, it's not a one-person show. It's not a two-person show. People ask me a lot now because we've made a lot of hiring decisions at Redis. Like, what is the culture that I'm walking into? And I say, hopefully you're part of the culture that we're creating, or we're hiring the wrong person. And that's what I mean by kind of the transparency and two-way street. I think that's how.
So obviously you'd started to make the transition at that point. You've gone into first line, and then 6 years later you find yourself into CRO. That's a very, very quick transition. Tell us the steps, and what did you do from first line to second line? What did you start to focus? What were the kind of epiphanies that were kind of you started to realize, and how much was it conscious and how much was it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the key part of that journey is being on a couple fast-growing companies, right? I was able to advance steps because we had the opportunities to go do that at AppDynamics and then again at ThoughtSpot. And I would say, we talked about it, frontline leader is definitely recruiting, probably being a little bit of a super rep, but making sure that you go execute on that. You go hit your number, and you know the product thoroughly, you know the process thoroughly, you're out there building champions with your team. I think as you start to move up kind of into second and third line, you start to look at the business a lot more holistically, right? You really start to focus on the ecosystem and the impact that they have on the overall go-to-market and the team. You start to really be focused on, obviously, SA hiring, SA retention, business value consultants, field marketing, so that you can start to do things at scale and with leverage. But you can never take yourself too far out of the business at the same time. If you're not recruiting, if you're not retaining your great people, and if you're not getting into the field and understanding truly, what's working in the field, what your ICs are facing as blockers, I think you're in a lot of trouble, actually. You can't leave that part of the business in any step in the journey.
At that moment, there's obviously, transitioning from first to second line, there's a lot more things that start to be kind of join your priorities, and the responsibility just starts to grow. How do you make sure that you don't start losing focus on prioritization and what you need to focus on to make sure that you can continue to bring impact and value?
Everything you guys have talked about on every one of your podcasts. Like that, I mean, in all sincerity, that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is if you actually believe in this playbook, if you've been lucky enough to be in enablement that's talking about recruiting and retaining and revenue and all the steps in revenue from, pipeline generation to building champions to articulating value, make sure your activity is in one of those three buckets. Otherwise, throw it to the side. And if you over-rotate to one, make sure you get back to the other really, really quickly. It's not rocket science at the end of the day if you truly do believe in it. It's just making sure you go execute it every day.
But at the same time, as you said, there's different areas of a business that aren't on your radar at that point, right? Yeah. Everything's been very sales focused. Yes, you're engaging with SEs and you're starting to look at through, a peripheral view on those other areas of the organization. But where were you conscious of that and saying to yourself, do you know what? Being a naturally curious person, I want to understand how those other areas worked. And was that probably the point which helped you think, yes, I want to become that second, third because I'm intrigued about these other areas of business? Or
yeah, I think you're definitely intrigued by putting multiple components of the org and the team together to get to excellence, for lack of a better term. But you're still got to put it together so that your ICs and your sellers can go hit their number, right? Like that's what I mean. You can't lose focus on that. So all you're doing is actually bringing the playbook that was taught to you as an IC, that was taught to you as a frontline sales leader, and bringing that across more components of the organization, and ideally having them think the way that we've been taught and the way that we executed in the field in the earlier parts of our kind of career.
Yeah. So did you find a mentor at that stage? Were you seeking that information to learn from your boss and then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you and I talked about this before. I've had lucky to have a lot of mentors throughout the time. So obviously throughout the AppDynamics period, I had Dolly above me throughout the entire time, but I worked for folks like Scott Davis and Brian McCarthy, and each one taught me a different kind of component of the business. I mean, Brian was fantastic at the cultural piece and absolutely kind of bringing multiple parts of the ecosystem together into one team. I mean, Scott looked at, the metrics tighter and stronger than anyone that I've ever worked with in my career, and really made me definitely, I think naturally I maybe went to the more qualitative part of the business and brought me back to that quantitative part of the business and made sure that I understand how the business was operating at scale. And, obviously Dolly was looking at the business as a whole different realm, but, really looking at multiple plays and how you can bring that across the business and really produce pipeline, produce sales plays at the end of the day throughout the entire customer journey. And multi-pronged sales plays. And I think, learning from each one of those three helped me grow in my career.
So one of those mentors to you was obviously Brian McCarthy, someone that you have, really, really fond, one of the most influential by your own admission on your career. Why did you then continue the journey by joining him at ThoughtSpot?
Look, I mean, for ThoughtSpot, it was professional and personal. I think Brian gave me the opportunity of a lifetime, and I never thought I'd have the opportunity to move to London and run Europe, and he gave me that opportunity. And at that stage, I think I had a 5 and an 8-year-old, and I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this now. And jumped in and moved my family to London in August of 2019, and it ended up being the best decision of my life, both personally and professionally, obviously. But from a professional perspective, I do think having to run Europe when you're 8 hours away from HQ is probably the best preparation to be a CRO that you can ask for. I mean, you're truly a GM of a business, more so than I think any position in kind of the go-to-market team. I still think that today. I think our leader of EMEA and International, Stefan, right now, has to run it like a mini CEO or a mini CRO because you're so removed from kind of the heartbeat of the organization. And I think that prepared me more than any position that I had to be a CRO.
At that point of transitioning then and being successful in that second and third lines, when did the idea of becoming a CRO cross your mind? And, you mentioned you were never conscious, you just carried on and you just kept climbing. But did you ever have that? At what point did you have that? Sorry, is the question.
Yeah, I think once you started to get to third and maybe even fourth line at AppDynamics, you did start to see and understand that you could do this. Because at that stage, I think by the time we left AppDynamics, the East was north of a $200 million business. So you're running a business at scale there, and you definitely believe that you could go do that, for a smaller company at that stage or a startup. So I think at that moment in time, I realized that this could be part of the journey, and but I didn't rush to it. Like you and I talked about before the show, like I always wanted to join opportunities that were exciting for me at the time, that I could learn from and kind of grow from, that would, one day put me in that position.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, again, I know, obviously, putting a recruitment hat on, you're probably approached, definitely within those 6 years. Obviously, you did 6 years at AppDynamics. Were you ever, I suppose, what's the question I'm trying to ask? Tempted to go and kind of like take on other opportunities, and what stayed and why did you stay at AppDynamics?
Yeah, of course. I think you're tempted. I'd be lying if you haven't been tempted throughout your career. And I think at that moment in time at AppDynamics, you knew we were part of something great, and to drag you out of AppDynamics before the acquisition would have been pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't a lot out there that was flying, faster and higher than AppDynamics at that moment from a go-to-market and a sales perspective.
I was just about to ask the question, what was it specifically that you were starting to learn through taking on the European markets and addition international market?
Look, I think you've got to run your business separately than the Americas. So ThoughtSpot, we went through a number of different journeys, but we're an analytics solution, and we were really trying to figure out our ideal customer profile, our ICP. And we figured it out, in terms of the ideal customer profile from a technology perspective, a vertical perspective, a size perspective. And because you're a little bit more nimble in Europe and you do kind of have the ability to influence the entire part of the organization over there, we pivoted to kind of focus on that ICP, which for us was, organizations with their data on top of Snowflake or BigQuery or Redshift, and like really monetizing their data in kind of an embedded fashion. And because of that, because we were able to move quick and make those decisions ourselves kind of over in Europe, it really empowered me to go do that. But then we were able to become the most productive team worldwide, right? And I actually still think, the European team is the most productive team today at ThoughtSpot, run by, Damian Brophy and Adam Watkins, because we just got laser focused on ICP and got to, have the whole organization kind of focused and energized around that.
Yeah, but I think, the point I think is quite interesting is that at that point you didn't have anybody to learn from, did you? Mm. So there is stepping into an. How do you know? Do you go in there with just right, let's strip this all back, or just take us through the journey of what you're going through your head to try and do that job?
Yeah, you're learning on the fly. I mean, just like any job. But it's a good point. Like, I went over there and had probably no idea or true, right to run Europe, But I knew how to run a sales team at scale. And I knew, as we talked about earlier, that second, third, fourth line journey, how to lead, the overall ecosystem. And I do think that's what that job is. And then, it's learning quickly. It's getting down, into the field still and understanding what's working there, what's not working there, and making decisions quickly to be able to pivot your business based off of qualitative and quantitative reasons. And we were able to do that pretty quickly over there.
Mm. And how are you doing that? Are you going and speaking to the different parts of Europe that break cut from a customer perspective, to going and speaking you personally, or are you orchestrating and getting that information through building a good team and getting them to bring that information?
Both. Both. I mean, look, once you get to a certain level within the organization, I think your job is to go peel back the onion and find problems.
Okay.
Like, you need to go search out things that are broken within the organization, and then you need to go get a strong team together and resolve those. And I still think that's the case as being a CRO today. Otherwise, you're not moving the business forward and you're not adding value to your team. So you do that through obviously hiring great people and listening to them, but you've got to go down yourself. You got to get a couple levels down and understand what's working in the field, what's working in certain, segments and parts of the business, so that you can go put those sales plays in place at scale to improve the business.
So obviously in the Playbook we talk a lot about happy years, right?
Yeah.
And obviously how are you applying the same principles in terms of how you scrutinize deal and qualification in how you're running your EMEA business right there? To help us understand the parallels and how those experiences of being an effective seller are now helping you transition into an effective leader.
Yeah, of course. You're bringing the culture that, you would expect any of these great sales organizations in terms of hiring people with high energy, high intelligence, high curiosity, high character that want to go build their career. But then, you're figuring out your sales stages, which can tweak, I think, definitely organization to organization and kind of solution to solution, and putting in key gates through that. And what we were just talking about, we put in a critical gate very early in our sales process to understand if the organization was ready for our solution. And, that helped us quickly, discard any kind of unqualified pipeline, and helped our sellers really focus on pipeline that they could convert. I only was able to do that with my team because I was able to experience that at every stop of my career, either as a seller, a frontline leader, or a second line leader. So that's what I meant. You've just taken what you've learned and you're trying to understand what's working for that company at that moment in time. And then you're putting in something structural that you can scale massively with a great team. That's it.
So Again, we've personally seen it with organisations landing to the European market, bringing a Playbook sales leader, and it hasn't worked. Why do organisations, just by applying that playbook, where do you think those types of organisations could potentially get it wrong?
I think it's lack of focus, right? As my previous CEO said, and I respect it for it, startups die from indigestion, not from starvation. So you have to focus your team. And over in Europe, I do think there's more of a challenge there. Everyone wants to open every market, and everyone thinks their market is going to be the biggest market, whether it's Southern Europe, whether it's DACH, whether it's the Nordics, whether it's UK or the Middle East. I think you got to go back to first principles of ICP. Who are we selling to? What are our ideal customers? Where are they based? Where can I put people within Europe to get the most scale for that and hit those in the most scaled manner? I believe that was the secret that I learned over in Europe.
Do you think that that there's a disconnect between really understanding the cultural differences and actually how that can affect who the ICP is, the personas, the relationship, the adaptations that are required, or the tweaks, or do you think that you should have a playbook that you could just apply and that constitutes scale?
I think the playbook always applies, right? If you're not generating pipeline, if you're not building champions, if you're not identifying pain, if you're not getting into qualified sales cycles and proof of concept, it doesn't matter what region you're in that we just talked about. The question is, where do you pick first? What has the greatest propensity to buy and be successful as a region? And how do you make sure you get that going at scale before you go bite off more than you can chew at that moment in time? I think that's the key. It's not the playbook. The playbook is the Bible. Don't deviate from that. Really understand the market and where you have the greatest, chance of being successful based on understanding the market, understanding the customers, and understanding where you've had success to date.
So obviously you've gone over to Europe.
Yeah.
You've been very successful, created a very, very successful business unit for 2 years, VP of EMEA.
I learned about football. Your football, just to be clear.
The one with your feet, the one where you actually...
the one with your feet. I actually learned about it. Yeah. I can't play it, but I learned about it. I just figured we'd cover that too.
I'm not a big football fan, but I'm sure Simon would be able to relate to that. But so you learned a lot about football in Europe, and then you've obviously got an opportunity to take on Brian McCarthy's role at that particular time as the CRO. Talk to us about that, right? And that transition, and why you knew it was the right time.
I knew it was the right time, just like a lot of other steps in my career. It was the moment that I had to go do it, right? We were having a lot of success in Europe, and I thought we were having a lot of success worldwide. And obviously, Brian moved on to a great opportunity at Rubrik, and it gave me the opportunity at that moment in time to go do it, So I didn't wake up saying I need to be a CRO the next week, but at that moment in time, I thought, if I don't grab this, someone else is going to go grab this. So I grabbed it and, ran worldwide from London for a couple months and was sick of, working till 3 or 4 in the morning and moved back to the States.
So obviously you've taken on this role as a CRO. What were some of those additional learnings that you learned, and, how did you get yourself prepared to take on that CRO role?
When you become a CRO, you got a lot more of the organization kind of under your umbrella, right? From almost, any aspect of the go-to-market. And as we talked about in Europe, I do believe it was a great learning moment for that. Because when you are over in Europe, even though you're the VP of EMEA or running the sales, at the end of the day, almost everything goes to you as in a dotted line regardless. Field marketing, SDR, even understanding a budget for the first time and a true P&L of how that theater is being run. So that's what I meant, what I said earlier of I do think that is one of the greatest positions in kind of this journey to prepare you for a CRO role. What I had to learn moving back from Europe is how to consistently engage and work with the executive team and the e-staff team, how to do a lot more planning for future years and budgeting and hiring in terms of headcount profile. I mean, headcount like quantity and where we were looking to go from a team and really a bottoms up plan across the globe. but from understanding the ecosystem, leading the ecosystem, managing the ecosystem so that you had a full kind of go-to-market team, I do think you get prepared for that in Europe.
Yeah. What about the actual preparation of responsibility, right? Because taking on that seat, there's no one else to look up to. It's you're only looking down from there. Help us understand some of those, learnings that you went through and, how you were able to deal with that level of responsibility.
Yeah, like we've said, bias for action. Like, go jump into the fight and figure it out as you go. But leverage your network too. I've mentioned a number of folks that I was lucky enough to work for that are all CROs now or have been CROs, including others. And I 100% have them on speed dial when I'm looking to kind of understand what could come kind of around the corner. But I do think you can't overcomplicate it. Like the beauty is you got to go recruit a freaking world-class team. You got to go get someone great to run the Americas. You got to go get someone great to run Europe, and you got to go get someone great to run international. You've got to put a sales process in place that can scale for your solution and your customer profile. And then you've got to go, put a culture and an organization in place that people want to be there for that journey. You know that they're learning. You know that they're growing their career. You know that they have the opportunity to have a life-changing kind of exit or earning of money, and don't deviate from that. All you're doing is doing it at scale right now with maybe a little more pressure on your shoulders, like you talked about, but focus on the basics, focus on the fundamentals, and I think it will help you a lot.
Yes, obviously, Brian would have laid down some strong foundations for that seat, and so, the role itself, you've got the foundations there, but what helps you now prepare yourself, in going into an organization like Redis, an organization where those foundations aren't there and you're now going to build this from the ground up?
Yeah, it's confidence. It's seeing the movie before, and it's going and focusing on the things that can move the needle the most. I think once you get to an organization of a little bit more scale, you do have to be really focused on where you focus. And, you can only spend your time in certain amount of areas. So you've got to go take an assessment of the organization and understanding where you can make an impact the most. I mean, one of the reasons that I was excited about Redis is I believe that, the go-to-market team and this playbook that we talk about could, massively impact that business. So, we set off and we ran at that. We ran at rebuilding the value framework. We ran at rebuilding the sales process, and we ran at, recruiting what I think is a pretty incredible worldwide team. And just stayed laser focused on that without letting anything else kind of get in our way. I think that's the greatest learning, not trying to hop into every little single thing and hop in, as we say, the big rocks. Don't move the sand, move the big rocks, and you'll end up in a much better spot.
Yeah. And so, we've seen it a lot, the playbook's one point, there's, following in peers, and peers can tend to be the carbon copies of their previous managers. Your artistry, what is it that's allowed you to, develop you as a person and create your own artistry and your own personality in the role of a CRO that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, enjoy it.
Right.
Like, I mean that sincerely. Like, we talked about the culture of BMC, we talked about the culture of AppDynamics. I love those journeys. So why shouldn't I love this? And enjoy selling software, enjoy running the team. And there's the transparency side and some other things that, like, I really are important to me. I'll walk people through, the good, the bad, and the ugly of previous quarters or where we stand as a business. Like, so that's just a tenet that has been super valuable to me because I always wanted to work for people that I thought were transparent. So I thoughtfully bring that to Redis, and I think I thoughtfully brought that to ThoughtSpot. But hopefully it's having some fun too as we're on these journeys.
What do you think's achievable at Redis?
Look, if you think about everything that we just talked about, my kind of history in this space, it was really the infrastructure play at BMC and even AppDynamics, and then the data play at ThoughtSpot. I think there were a couple things that, I firmly believed when I took this opportunity. And the first is we are definitely still in the decade of data. I don't think we've at all hit the peak of that. Data is doubling rapidly. And I know we've seen a lot of successes with the Databricks and the Snowflakes of the world, but I think we're just even at the beginning of this kind of decade of data. And then I saw, this pre-Gen I or Gen AI space as being something that is without a doubt real and going to just have a massive change on the way we work. I believe that Redis is at the intersection of both those, right? It's the second largest pre-IPO data company out there outside of Databricks, which is obviously an incredible story. And that's really built us to get to 200 million ARR based on the first part, the decade of data. We still have that in front of us while we are becoming the linchpin for architectures that run AI applications because they need to rely on sub-millisecond response time. That is what I think the opportunity for Redis is. I think this is a once-in-a-generation type of opportunity. And I believe that, everything that you tout in terms of the playbook and kind of, go-to-market excellence can have a massive impact on this organization over the next couple of years worldwide.
So in terms of the foundations that you're laying at the moment, are you working towards a goal, or is there a target that you're kind of setting, whether it's revenue, IPO, having a generational impact? What do those actual targets look like, and what are you driving your troops towards?
Right now, we're trying to be excellent at what we do. We're trying to go create a motion that probably elevates and gets the Redis value wider within the organization because there's that amount of capability that this can go from a developer to an operator to a CIO and add significant value. So we're arming our troops with the ability to articulate that value, but then bring that value to our customers. So right now, that's what we're focused on. Excellence in the field. Beyond that, obviously, we're looking to, have incredible growth year over year and bring this company from 200 million ARR to $1 billion.
Wow, I mean, those are very lofty ambitions. What do you think are going to be the biggest opportunities for you to really kind of go and drive that and make that happen in the most effective way?
Look, it's everything that we've talked about. We got to go recruit, a world-class team. We've got to go make sure we really understand our customers and where they are on this journey to providing applications in real time and then providing the AI capabilities on top of that. And we have to go be, the team and the solution that goes and solves those problems for them consistently.
Great. In terms of where you are on that right now, so are you have you set yourself some target areas that you're really looking to invest in? Is Europe a big market for you internationally?
Yeah, we're growing across the globe. We're growing in the Americas, but we're growing very massively internationally. International is close to 50% of our revenue. And we have openings across Nordics, UK, and a lot in Asia in terms of Singapore and in India. So that's a big push for us. If you look at kind of what Redis does and where the center of these applications that needs to scale massively and needs to have real sub-millisecond response time, India and Asia is an incredible market for us, right? Their GDP is growing massively, but their population is growing massively too, and everything's being done digitally. On top of that, everything's 24/7. I was with an SVP of a massive bank in India when I was over there a couple months ago, and he walked me through that, and he basically said, hey, like 3 or 4 years ago, it was my mobile banking application. That's what mattered, and when it really mattered was basically 8 to 5. He goes, now we have dozens of transactions that need sub-millisecond response time and 5 nines, and now due to the India, how we're growing in the world that we're supporting, we need that available 24/7. Redis is the center of all that. So it's an incredible market for us, and it's an incredible opportunity for us.
When you look at an organization like Redis, it's not a startup but you've obviously had huge success. It's very easy to kind of judge an organization like Redis without really knowing much of what is there and what it can become. What do you think maybe some of the common misconceptions are, and how are you working towards perhaps dispelling those and helping to really drive forward something that's really meaningful and special?
Yeah, I think, look, if you go to the developer and enterprise community, Redis is loved. It's one of the most loved databases year in and year out for developers. And if you go talk to all the major banks just down the street, they rely on Redis for their most business critical applications and transactions. I think the next journey of Redis is probably bringing that brand and the value of that technology at scale worldwide. And that's the opportunity that presents itself at Redis right now. We get to do that through, what I think is one of the, best CEOs in the Valley in terms of Rowan, who joined the, business just a couple months before me, and go take, this fantastic technology and this fantastic kind of user adoption and go bring that at scale to across the enterprise.
What makes him such a good CRO? CEO, sorry.
Look, first off, I would say he's a professional CEO. So he hasn't founded a company before, but he's run multiple BUs at massive scale across Symantec, across Cisco, and then he's been the CEO of Five9s for the previous 5 years before joining Redis and grew that market cap massively. So, everything we talked about my journey of being able to see the movie before, like he's been able to see that. And what I appreciate a ton about Rowan is, he was at Cisco when they acquired AppDynamics. He got to see this playbook being executed for a little bit and really appreciating it, and went out and wanted to bring that into Redis. So he understands the product thoroughly. He's a developer and engineer at heart, understands how to run all aspects of the business, but really, like alongside me, obviously wants to bring in a world-class scaled go-to-market team.
What's the biggest impact that the board and the organization has seen as a result of the initiatives that you guys have been driving over the last few months?
Yeah, obviously, I think they've seen the talent that has joined the organization. We have Tom Rabeau as our Chief Customer Officer. We have John Gephardt as our VP of Americas. We brought in Amanda Gobb to run enablement, and a number of other people. But it's trying to bring in the playbook that we've talked about at scale, right? Where messaging and bringing value to new personas, not just developers, but developers, operators, and SVPs or CIOs. And we're bringing in a pipeline culture so that, we're generating pipeline, not just the inbound pipeline that Redis has a lot of because they're an open source community, but actually going and generating pipeline in the highest demand organizations and the highest demand personas with the most amount of pain so that we can solve that. And they're starting to see the fruits of that at scale.
Great. I think this is a time when we just reflect on what we've spoken about and what we've heard today, because I think, at the top of the show, we explained that you've obviously had this amazing kind of, within a very short period of time of 6 months, you were from IC to CRO in a very short period of time.
That'd be too quick.
He said 6
I meant
months.
6 years. 6 months.
I think it was more than 6 years. We're stuck on 6 years. I don't think it was that.
Well, I think the end of your IC career to
and
then start taking your first line leadership, there was 6 years to get you to CRO.
Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
There's 8 years from the start of AppDynamics to get you to CRO.
Oh, wow.
Which
Okay.
obviously 2 years of that was actually operating as an IC.
So that's a very quick transition. But I think what we
By the
failed
sound of
to
things,
see,
it doesn't seem like it should have been.
I mean,
that
I got
long.
a lot of gray hair. This hasn't been that easy, just to be clear.
absolutely. But I think what's interesting is that it's really easy to then ignore what happened before that and the foundations before that.
100%.
And whilst we've obviously focused on that kind of that 6-year journey, it's the fundamentals and the mastery and the acceptance, but also at the beginning you spoke about the pressure. Don't be scared of the pressure, take the pressure. And by pressure, I think you're talking about accountability, being accountable, taking more on, but actually delivering on what you promise. And I think at every stage, what the playbook really allows someone like you to achieve is to give you focus on how do I achieve excellence at the various gates. And I think what you've not been scared of is to really chase the excellence rather than chase the title. And naturally those foundations created the foundations which then allowed you to then have that really steep trajectory to get to that point of CRO, because all of the elements, the mastery, or as much of it as is possible, because obviously you can never master everything, but you've got the foundations that are going to give you the building blocks from which you can then obviously make that growth.
Yeah, I would say not just like chase the opportunity, chase the learnings, and embrace that, and opportunities will come from it. Enjoy it, but learn from it, and the titles will come. But don't chase the title. Chase the opportunity. Chase the team. Chase the learnings, and everything else will come.
I think you focused on the mastery of just each individual stage of that journey, and it's just allowed you then to create that building block to then take you to that next step, and then you focused heavily on that next journey, and you just carried on climbing in a very, very, very effective way. So it's been truly, for me, it's just been inspirational having you on the show. I know we've been on at you for a while to get you on here, and I appreciate you getting here and finally doing this with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
The persistence has paid off. So, but to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you like what you've heard, please do subscribe to our various channels on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. All the links are in the description below, and we look forward to welcoming you back for another session soon. Thank you very much.